Welcome to Writing About Method, or what I call AKA Chapter 3. And this is about considerations and structures for our Chapter 3. And there are four objectives to tonight's webinar and discussion. The first one, to understand where in our research output we write about methodology. And more importantly, what is actually the level of detail that is expected from that? Now, most of us might think, oh, I just write about it in chapter 3. I have a methodology chapter, that's where it goes. But actually, the writing about methodology pretty much filters through every single chapter of our dissertation. So I want to touch upon that so that you get an idea of where you are expected to mention research methodology. The second objective is to understand the key information that is expected to be included in your methodology chapter. Now, what I say by expected is, look, we all have different research. And as such, what we include in our methodology chapter will, of course, be a little bit different between each of us in this room. But there are some minimum expectations. What do we as examiners and as supervisors want from you in, of course, that chapter? So I'm going to talk about the minimum expectations. You need to excel and surpass those. The third objective is to discover some additional information that might be pertinent to include. And I'm going to talk about some other themes that are emerging and proving themselves as very important and very relevant to have, especially if you're doing social science research. But it is actually applicable to many other disciplines as well, broader disciplines like business, like education. So I'm going to talk about some of the additional information that we can include into our research methods chapter. Why I talk about this is not to make life harder for you by giving you more work, but I want to showcase how and what can you do to show me as an examiner, to show me as a supervisor, what can you include? What can you do to show me your research thinking? Now, that's a really important thing to think about. This is not just about what methods you use. It is about the decisions, the thinking processes, the decisions you make, the choices you've had to think through as you go through your research. And it's also going to address what makes you the best researcher for the topic that you are doing, because that is increasingly important in doctoral research these days. And the final objective is to learn some best practice tips or advice for executing the writing of your methodology chapter. Identifying what goes into it is one thing. Writing the chapter, getting all it out there and, putting it in ways that are easy to understand, easy to follow, and most important, easy for someone to replicate. That's also a very large challenge in what we have to do. Now, I'm going to start off with the idea of taking methodology for granted, because I know in my early days as a researcher, I really didn't give enough attention to the nuances of methodology. And I didn't give enough attention to the defense, the justification, I guess, of the methodologies that I chose. And often we take it for granted because we think, oh, our supervisor already knows this. I only have to write a brief amount. The reality is that's not always going to be the case. As with everything in your doctoral dissertation, we want you to be detailed. I give us enough information so that if I've never, ever seen this method before, I can understand it and replicate it. And I can understand, most importantly, why you chose this method. But also, give me enough information so that I can step by step go through and do the same research and come to the same general conclusions you've got. So we want detail, but that detail tells me something about you. The detail tells me, as a researcher, you understand not only the method, the process, you understand why that method and that process or set of processes was chosen. And that's what I want. I, as an examiner, yes, I'm looking at your research. I'm looking at everything up to the conclusions. But most importantly, I'm looking for you to showcase to me, why did you make some decisions? You know, why did you choose focus groups over interviews, for example? Was that backed up in either the literature, maybe common sense? Was it backed up in intuition and understanding that there is a need to evolve the existing approaches and so forth? So quite often we take it for granted. We assume our supervisors and our examiners will know it, but don't make that assumption. We write to make sure that they cannot misunderstand or mistake anything that you do. Now, I want to start with a quote from Patrick Brindle from 2018. Many of us, when we're writing, of course, we write from experience. We are writing in the context of our own memories, of having done the research, of having carried out an interview, for instance, or conducted an experiment. Within that corpus of memory are all kinds of assumptions. I don't need to talk about this. I don't need to talk about that because it's obvious. But of course, if your readers weren't there when you were doing your research, it may not be obvious to them. And so it becomes absolutely critical when you do your final edit of anything that you write about methods, that you subject the work to the question of, would someone who wasn't there when I did my research understand everything that I did and all the decisions that I made? And I want to emphasize that although I put that huge paragraph from Brindle in there, it's actually that one last sentence that should guide our choice of what stays into our methodology section and what we need to include in there. So would someone who wasn't there when I did my research understand everything that I did, excuse me, and all the decisions that I made? Now, what's valid from here is we're not writing this for our supervisors. We're not writing this for our examining panel when we do our Viva and so forth. We're actually writing it for other people, other stakeholders, other publics, people out there who would be interested in the research that we do. And the key outtake, as I believe it to be, becomes, have I explained my decisions in such a way that convinces others that I made the right choices? That's important. I want to know about the decisions that you are making as a researcher. I don't want you specifically to write, I chose to do this. but I want to be able to see that you made balanced, intelligent choices about the method, and you'll back that up with evidence citations from others that showcase, yes, this is the way to move forward. This is robust, reliable research. That's what, oops, sorry, slipped two through. That's what we want to see from this chapter, as well as the details. So keep those two sentences, two questions, I guess, in mind as you're writing and you're going through. And I'm going to give you almost a checklist. It's not a really great checklist, but it's an overview of what I would want to see within your methodology chapter. So it gives you a framework that you can work from. Now, earlier, I touched upon the fact that most of us think research methods fit or sit into the research methodology chapter only in our dissertation. The reality is every chapter of a dissertation, whether it fits the 5-chapter model or a different permutation of that, every variation has methods involved everywhere. Every single chapter has a mention. Chapter 3, research methodology, as I view it, is the big chunk. It's like 85, 90%. But you will be mentioning it elsewhere. Your introductory chapter, you will be mentioning how you are going about the research. It won't be detailed, but it will be enough for me to get an understanding of how you're going to go about it in relation to the questions that you are putting forward, whether they be research questions, research hypotheses, or so forth. But it will be enough for me to say, oh, candidate has 3 questions. 3 questions are important. Candidate's going to use this approach. That makes sense. That's what I want from it. So it fits into chapter 1. It fits into chapter 2 because a good a good component of a strong literature review will not only showcase the other research that has been done in relation to where you're heading so that you can identify the typical term, the research gap, but so that you can identify where you're heading. You are likely also to review the chronological history of methodologies used in your subdiscipline that relates to the research you're doing. You know, over time, we might be doing a research topic that has a reasonable amount of history, maybe only 10 or 15 years, maybe a little more. We can still be cutting edge, even though somebody was working on this 20 years ago, because what might be cutting edge is the methodology. So the literature review, there should be a section that touches upon how has methodology either evolved over time. Maybe it's gone quantitative first into qualitative, which, for example, many business subjects have done, many social science subjects have done. So whether it's, how it's evolved over time, but also it can identify for you, again, the gaps. You can have a methodology gap. What hasn't been tried? And if, like me, you're interested in creative research methods, we also have what are the opportunities to tackle existing problems through new ways. How can I bring new understanding of methodology or new understanding of data analysis even to what is there to further the results and to, of course, make a contribution and hopefully make an impact. Yes, it's in research methodology. That doesn't require any discussion. It's in data analysis because the way in which we set up our methodology has a direct relationship to the types of analysis that we can do. So as we present our raw data and we make sense of our raw data, that's harking back to the methodology we chose and how we set up the framework to make that happen. And then, of course, the results and conclusions, we are, of course, going to very briefly touch upon the methods again that we used. And we're also having an opportunity to say, look, I tried this method. I did an entire research based on photo elicitation, and I discovered that although it was good, videos would have been better. You're still talking about methodology. You're talking about the limitations that you faced at the end of the day and what you could have done with that. Bibliography, of course, because you're citing other people. Now, my point with here is Chapter 3, research methodology, doesn't sit in a silo all on its own. It has a relationship to every part of our dissertation. Now, as we're writing our proposal, we're not going to see that yet. It's going to take us a while. As we're sort of into our data collection phase, we see it a little bit. But when we come to do a final edit of our complete finished dissertation, that's the point at which we're going to say, okay, I really do have to make sure I have cross-referenced this everywhere. So keep that in mind because it's very important. Now, before I get into the actual part about writing about our methodology, I want to kind of freshen ourselves with the daily diary concept. And this is something I feel is a very valuable tool for researchers. It doesn't matter whether this is your first project or, you're on your 50th project and, having done it for many years. My approach is always, as you're doing your research, to write. Have a notebook, write things down. Now, what I'm looking for from here, or what will benefit you, what will help you from here, is not us trying to write paragraphs and sections and maybe a whole chapter. It's actually keeping a diary of the decisions and the choices that were available. So actually having a diary that says, look, today I was confused about the software I had to use. These were my choices. Why did I choose this? This is the stuff we take for granted because we think, oh, maybe I don't have to write about it. Okay. Or we think, I'll remember that. I can walk into my kitchen and forget why I went there. I'm certainly going to forget elements of things, of decisions that I made that I should be writing into my dissertation. So my advice here is, look, consider writing methodology from day one of your research. It becomes a diary, which of course you edit, but it reflects the decisions taken, the choices available. Methodology is not separate from your research writing. Make it personal, make it concurrent. This diary idea doesn't necessarily mean you're writing paragraphs for your dissertation. But what you're doing is you're keeping a daily record of things that you have to do as a researcher and key choices you made as a researcher that affect how your doctoral program evolved. So write about your decisions and don't not only what they were, but why were they made? Why did you decide on certain software? Why did you decide to use video instead of still photography? Why did you decide focus groups instead of interviews? Or why did you decide diaries or visual diaries even instead of focus groups or in addition to focus groups? Because as you write your research plan out and as you refine it towards the end of your doctoral journey, you're going to want to justify. And here's where you can justify it through your own intuition, through common sense. You can justify it through noting down a couple of citations that actually influenced your thinking on this. So I feel that this is a very valuable tool. Does it feel like more work? Yes, because, keeping a little diary, taking some notes, all of that, it is extra work. But it is extra work that will directly contribute to the dissertation that you are writing. So it's not extra. Because if you don't do it and later on, you're going to be spending a lot of time thinking, now, what else do I have to include? Or you're going to be looking at my checklist and you're going to be saying, what was that? Why did I do this? What was the rationale behind this? So it's really just record keeping for yourself. Now, what do I include or what do I not include in my research methods chapter? So that's where excuse me, that's where we're heading to next. This is really a very simple list first, and I'm going to go through this list in more detail after this slide, okay? But, what do I look for in a dissertation methodology chapter? These are the headings at minimum I expect to see. I expect to see aims. I expect to see the ethical considerations. I expect to see an outline of the methods chosen. I expect to see reasons why those specific methods were chosen. I expect to see an explanation of those methods. I expect to see discussion on how was the data analyzed. Now, here's a challenge. When I'm writing my research proposal, how will I analyze the data? When I'm finishing up my dissertation, how was the data actually analyzed? It may change. And what you have in your proposal and how that evolves into what you as a researcher operationalize, it may be different. That's okay. Don't look at it and say, oh, I did something different. The proposal is a guideline, and chapter 3 is in the proposal. But it can evolve, as with everything, it evolves. The literature review evolves as you read more and more things up to date, and as you start looking at the different works that the more contemporary researchers have cited as well. So it's okay for you, in this case, for this chapter to evolve as well. But we do want to see, how is data being analyzed? How do you plan to do it? At proposal stage, when we write this chapter, we may not be particularly certain about how we're going to do this. We can put in ideas. So our proposal, this will be very draft, very loose. But as that evolves and morphs into our final dissertation, we are going to be a lot more specific about it. And the preciseness is, of course, going to get stronger. At proposal stage, it's nice for you to be able to say, okay, I want to do it this way. It's going to be this way. This will be involved. This will be involved. And these are the outcomes that we hope to get. Great. But if you can't be that detailed at that stage, it's okay. The detail comes in after you've done the data collection, as you've realized what were the challenges, and as you've adjusted. For example, maybe you've done a survey and maybe you decided you wanted to run all the data that you've got, you wanted to run it through SPSS. Lovely. And then you realized that R was easier. So you reran the data in R and you use that. That's fine. You're just being very precise with what the actual approach was. So that section of the chapter will, of course, evolve, but it will become more accurate and more detailed as you collect the data, as you analyze the data. You're going to want to address what materials or equipment were used during the research. You're going to want to talk about were there any hurdles or difficulties faced during the research. And I promise you, none of us are going to have a perfect experience where, oh, my research collection, my data collection was so easy. I just went and did it, and wow, I had some data and I analyzed it, and there's my results. That is not going to happen for any of us. There are always going to be hurdles. Why do I like to see the hurdles or the difficulties? One, it shows you're human. Two, as a researcher, your job is to resolve problems, resolve issues. You're answering questions, you're innovating on methods, you're innovating, you're innovating on approaches, you're solving problems. I want to get into your mind. I want to understand, how did you solve a hurdle that you had? It's okay that there are roadblocks, that there are hurdles, that there are challenges. What's interesting, what makes you a good researcher, what makes you a graduatable researcher is finding a way to resolve those, move forward and complete your research. And this is the opportunity where you get to put this in. Now, again, at the stage we write our proposal, where we're talking about methods, you won't have this detail. This comes later on as you're finishing up the full dissertation, which is a big edit of your proposal plus a couple of extra chapters. This is the point at where you put it in. And the final element I really want to see in this chapter is an evaluation. And it is an evaluation of how the method helped answer or address the questions or challenges that you identified right at the beginning. Your research questions, how did the method actually address it? Was your methodology enough to give you a reasonably comprehensive understanding of the challenges, or was it not strong enough, which meant you had to make other decisions with your research? So let's go through some of these. The aims. We want you to reiterate your research topic, the questions, give an overview of how you plan to investigate this. Now, I'll be honest, the thing I hate the most about doctoral level dissertations, even masters, is there's a lot of repetition. You write it in chapter 1. In chapter 2, you rephrase it and you add to it. In chapter 3, you take an element of it and you write it and you do it more detailed. There's a lot of overlap between the chapters, and there's a lot of what feels like repetition. as we write. That does not happen in a journal publication. It does not happen if you're writing a textbook or a monograph or a chapter in a book for someone. That doesn't happen. It's specific to the doctoral dissertation. My advice there, if you feel like you're repeating yourself, you're probably on the right track because that's kind of how it's set up. Don't worry about it. Let's move to ethical considerations. Now, there's two elements to what we are looking for, what we need. One is any ethical or philosophical considerations that need to be made. So listing and explaining. If we're doing qualitative research, the typical ethical considerations will be informed consent, voluntary participation, anonymity, and there'll be a couple of others too. But you need to identify all of the elements and how did you address them. For example, if you are doing observational research, are you getting informed consent from the participant? Scary name to use, if they didn't even know you were doing research on them. And then you've got to say, well, why is that justifiable? So really, it's a discussion of what are the ethical issues that your research encounters? How do you mitigate those? And how did you address them? Okay. That then leads us into the university side of things, the ethics committee approval or internal review board. Every university has a different terminology that they use for ethics committees, but you need to state that you got approval. What is the approval number? What is the date? The approval may or may not become an appendix to your dissertation, depending on your university style. But you need to put that in there. And secondly, we might have had to pivot our research. Maybe we started in a particular way. For example, we did observational research. And the observational research was helpful, but it wasn't giving us the data that we needed to be as detailed as we'd like to be. So we decided to change our approach. We decided to do an interview. No problem. But every change of approach means there are different ethical considerations for you to do. And that means you have to get the university's approval to make those changes. So if you've realigned, if you've pivoted, if you've changed, that mention goes in there too. Again, that shows me the decisions that you have made as a researcher. And I can evaluate your problem solving to get the research that you want. And that's a good thing. So that needs to be mentioned in there. Let's then look at an outline of the design and the methods chosen. So you have to outline your overall research design, whether it's experimental, descriptive, exploratory. Are you qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, multi-methods? A couple of things that come back into this. One, I would want a brief description of whatever methods you are using. Yes, I'm going to get some boring paragraphs about a definition of a personal interview or the definition of a focus group, or everybody will cite John Cresswell, the definition of mixed methods research. We have to accept that. But in addition to that overview of what the method and the process was, if you are doing mixed methods or multi-methods, I would also expect you to map out, to diagramize how the methods relate to each other over the course of your research program. So, for example, are you starting with qualitative moving into quantitative? Are you embedding them into each other? Are you doing them simultaneously? I would expect some form of diagram that actually helps me see the methods you have used over time and how those methods integrate and relate to each other. That would be important here. Now, if you're like me and you can't draw for shit, and that's truth, I did actually do a diagram of a mixed methods research I'm doing, and it's complicated as because it's messy. Don't worry so much. Keep the diagram simple. We want to see the flow. If you're worse than me, get AI to help interpret the diagram or to help interpret your description of it and suggest possible diagrams for that. So there are ways to help. Worst case, come to an organization like mine and say, look, this is my research methods. This is how I want to do it. How can I map it out? And, a consultant like the third degree, we can sit with you for an hour or two, understand what you're doing, draw it up, work with you to make sure it represents exactly what you have, and say, okay, you've got a diagram that you can use. And then you have simply mapped out the methods. Now, why do I like to see a methods map at this stage? The old phrase, a picture says 1,000 words. Yeah, it really does. It makes it easy. I will look at your picture before I read your words. And I can see from your picture, oh yeah, this is on track. And then I can look at, does your description do justice? Does your description fill in the details for me? That helps me understand how you think, and it helps me understand how are you approaching this research. So it's a really good thing to do. So it's not only the written outline, it is how you can go about mapping it out as a visual to show the reading audience that you have. Now we get into reasons for choosing specific research methods. So we have touched upon this in our literature review. And this is our overlap. Okay, the literature review sets us up in terms of where we're heading with the methods. This gives us a chance to say, why did you choose this? Now, what I want to see here is not you chose it because citation A and citation B suggested it. I want you to show me the linkage, the connection. And I use the word clear connection. But I want you to show me the connection with the overall research approach that you've got. And that's the important thing. What are your questions? How does this help? How does this choice of methods, whatever permutation it is, how does this choice of methods help you towards understanding your study's purpose? Does it give you the data that you think it's going to need? Now, let me give a good example here. I've seen a lot of researchers at doctoral level that have done simple quantitative questionnaires and surveys. And they say that it gives them a reasonable sample size. They can achieve saturation. They can get sufficient data to make some conclusions. And then they use the wrong type of questions. So I like to see it because I want to see that you know you are getting the data that you absolutely need from this, and that's going to help you in order to, sorry, hang on. That's going to help you in order to be able to uh, address the research questions that you have got. Oopsie, this is what goes wrong with when they change things. So an explanation of the methods that you have chosen. Now, again, we're getting a tiny bit of a repeat. We're getting a rationale for selecting. The rationale might be contemporary practice. It may be how literature cited has shown problems with other methods and left open the door for new methods. You need to give an overview as to why these were the most appropriate methods. Actually, there's hundreds of different approaches we could take. Why were these the most appropriate? Perhaps they were proven before with different populations, different groups, but a similar topic. Perhaps other methods were shown not to give the depth of nuance that you needed and the depth of understanding. Or maybe there's been a revolution in data analysis. For example, using AI for data analysis now means we can use previously uh, difficult to integrate data sets, but we can use them through the power of AI to actually get valuable data, to see trends, to see patterns, to unlock uh, behaviors. So that can be a reason as well. I want to see the when, where, when, and who. How did you sample? Which sampling techniques did you use? How did you recruit your participants? Did you encounter gatekeepers? What did you have to do to get through those gatekeepers? All of that are things we want to see. Again, I want to see from you that you are making decisions, that you are solving problems, and that you are progressing the research that you've got. Now, if we go down the typical qualitative, it might be talking about personal observations, focus groups, interviews, creative research methods, or any number of other things. I want to get a rationale, and you're going to be citing a few previous and related works, of course. In quantitative, you might be doing experiments, you might be doing surveys or questionnaires. In mixed methods, and this is where you have to work harder. In mixed methods, I'm going to want to see the interrelationship of the qualitative to the quantitative. How do they feed off each other? And how do you execute that? Now, what are you doing? Are you doing a pilot study, a quantitative pilot study to build into a qualitative analysis? Fine, but I want to see how and why. That becomes essential for you to describe for me. And again, that can go back to the mapping, the visual, the diagram that you produce. It can go back to that to help you explain, or you could do a variation of that diagram to showcase how the different data integrates with each other. All right, data collection methods. So did you have a pilot study? And if you had a pilot study, was the pilot study a standalone? Or did you develop procedures and protocols to integrate it to the main study. Sometimes when we do a pilot study, it's there to help us refine the research tool that we're going to use. And then we just start the study all over again with a bigger sample size. Sometimes when we do a pilot study, we can use that data and incorporate it with the subsequent data sets and actually progress. So it becomes an integral part of the research that we do. What did the pilot study do? Did it help you understand the psyche of the respondents? Did it help you refine the questions that you wanted to use? It's really about what is the actual purpose of the pilot study and how you used it. If you used any instruments, and instruments utilized is somebody else's survey or questionnaire. Maybe, you're doing some psychology research and a psychologist that you're associated with had done previous research and developed a survey. So how did what was the survey for? What was the questionnaire for? How did you adapt it? So one of my very first research projects was an ethnography of mainland Chinese immigrants in Auckland, in New Zealand, where I'm from. And this was actually a postgraduate course assessment. It was innovative in its time because not only did we go out and do surveys and other things, what we actually did is this class produced a book, an edited volume, an ethnographic study of migrant communities in Auckland. And it had over 3 or 4 editions, in fact, over 3 or 4 years, multiple books came out. But what was great about it is it started from our lecturer. Our lecturer had done some research and he designed a decent questionnaire. Okay, I say design decent because we all adapted it. What we did is, as we each identified a community that we wanted to study, and in many cases it was a community we had some sort of social involvement with or family connections to, in that respect. But we then took this questionnaire, which was, I think, about 8 or 9 pages. This was in the days before online surveys. Okay, so we actually had physical papers that people filled out, and we adapted it to suit the community. We kept the structure the same, i.e., the different themes that we wanted. Many of the questions applied across regardless of the community that we were looking at. But we adapted different questions to suit the community or the ethnic community that we were focusing on. And we had to describe the fact that we had made changes to this. Now, when it was all compiled as a book, it actually became valuable because the approach from each researcher was the same. But there was also an acknowledgement that each researcher had made some realignments, edits, to make sure that it fitted with the social understanding of the communities that we were researching. Now, that's when we take somebody else's survey. Now, nothing wrong with doing that. It's a great way to progress. Many people won't just take one person's survey. They will find 3, 4, 5 different questionnaires or surveys from experts that have been published, and they will take elements out of each of those and merge them together as their own instrument. And that's, again, the adaptation. I've used from Smith 2020. I've used from Selby 2021. I've used from XYZ 2024. And out of those 3 instruments that have been published and successfully used, I've taken the components that are valuable for my research. That's an adaptation. And you've got a complete survey, questionnaire, instrument available to use. Now let's go to a different side. What if I don't have that luxury? What if I can't find somebody else's, or what if I want to start from the very beginning? So this is when I design my own instrument. How do I design it? What were the steps that I took to actually put together a survey? And how did that happen? In addition to that, what's different is because this has been created from scratch, you need to validate this. You need experts to come in and say, okay, I agree with your approach. I agree with your order. I agree with your choice of wording, or I challenge you on this. So when you design your own, or sometimes even when you combine from 3 or 4 other people's, and you're getting something that's quite a different manifestation of it, then you need experts to come in. And there's a couple of different, there's a couple of different types of experts that you might engage with. First one, obviously, academic experts. Another academic or two in your field who have similar research interests or understanding of where you're going, that can then go through the survey or go through the questionnaire, go through the instrument, and give you feedback. Sometimes feedback good, sometimes feedback bad, but give you feedback until you get to the point that they agree with it. Now that's fine, but you might also want to have external experts, industry experts. So these may be non-academics, but people who are working in the area related to where your research is. These could be stakeholders. They could, in a way, be other researchers who are not institutionally affiliated. So we've got different types of experts that we can use. Seldom are we just going to get one expert. We're going to try and get 2 or 3, but don't overkill on this because it takes time. So, 2 or 3 is more than enough to get it through. But keep in mind, if you're designing your own, the time frame will be a bit longer because the processes take longer. Keep in mind addressing 3 different experts' feedback, or worse, maybe 6 different experts' feedback. How are you going to be able to address that? And how much time are you going to need? So talk to your supervisor, work out a program, work out a strategy to get it right, and also identify your experts well before you identify what you want to put into your instrument or what you want to put into your questionnaire or survey so that it makes it easier for you. Then I'm going to want to see information about collection processes involved. What was the step-by-step of data collection? How was it done from finished protocols through to data in your laptop? And that includes things like software, storage, people involved. And I've put at the end, research assistants. We may have people helping us with the research. What training did you give them? How did you make sure that each research assistant was trained to execute the research questions or the research instrumentation in the same way? So these are what I want to be able to see. I then want to see, how was the data analyzed? So what coding did you do? How did you check for missing data? How did you address outliers? Did you use software? Now, software is going to be, for many of us, a contentious issue. I'm going to put it really plainly. Using software to analyze data is okay, no problem. I simply need you to tell me what software you used. Don't tell me you used SPSS and that's it. Tell me you used SPSS version 23.4 cracked version. So even if you're using, I don't want to say illegal software, inauthentic software, that's fine. But I want you to tell me because I want to know that if I run that data through the exact same software, I'm going to get the same outcome that you got. That's all I care about. I don't care whether you use free software. I don't care if you use software that you have paid for. I care that you mention what it was. Not every university is the same. Not every university has access to the same softwares. Not every student or research candidate can afford to purchase the software that they need. So we might have to use pirated software. Now, that may be argued as unethical, but there's a counter element. If your university can't provide it for you and you can't afford it, that's unethical. So simply just tell me what you used. Outline what materials or equipment you use. Now, this could be lab equipment, it could be software, as I said, open source versus commercial justification. And the justification is university doesn't have it, it's expensive and it's outside of my research budget. Perfectly fine. Put that in there. Hurdles or difficulties. This is the, I guess, the interesting part for us. What challenges or difficulties did you face? How did you overcome them? Again, that shows me your problem-solving skills as a researcher. Maybe you didn't get the required sample size. Okay, that happens. But when I understand that you had language difficulties communicating with people or other things, and you took steps to minimize that, I see actually this is a researcher who really did try their absolute best to get where they needed to be. So this to me is important. And it might include things, the typical hurdles, typical difficulties, finding participants. That is a pain. Problems with consent, access to equipment, shortage of resources, including money. So what did you do to resolve that? I couldn't afford NVivo because it's a $2,000 license. So I used a cracked version that I got from a friend for $5. No, you got over a resource shortage. I'm cool with that. And the last one is the evaluation. So even though you're going to address it later, especially the details of this are going to go into your conclusion, this is a chance to say, did your choice of method actually work for you as you thought it would? Were there limitations? Were there areas where there can be improvement? I'm not asking you to go back and fix it. I'm just asking you to be honest and say, we gave this a go. Everything pointed to this being the way to do it. When we executed it, we saw some things that were a little bit challenging. Now, for the final section, I want to move into some writing tips for us. And, these are, in a way, simple writing tips, but they're still useful. Always look at other methodology sections. Go into your university library, go into your department library, ask your supervisor, ask lecturers that you're friendly with in your department. Have a look at a few other doctoral dissertations and how they wrote their methodology sections. That's going to help. Always plan your structure. Now, if we go back here, I've given a scaffolding for a structure. Yes, you can adjust this and you might add more and you might be more detailed with it. But plan your structure so that you know what's going to go into it. Again, consider your audience. Even though this is going to your supervisor, your Viva examining panel, your audience is also other researchers. What do they want to know? What do they need to know in order for them to solve the problems that you encountered? Because it's like a handover to someone else. So keep that in mind. Keep focused on your aims and your research questions. Make sure you come back to those obstacles, the difficulties, and most importantly, the solutions. Be very detailed in citing relevant sources. That's an obvious thing, but most people spend the time citing sources in chapter 2, the literature review area, rather than so much in chapter 3. In chapter 3, it's got a lot of relevance, a lot of importance. And think about the consistency and alignment. All chapters align. As I said, there's repeats. You talk about methodology in chapter 1, in chapter 2, in chapter 4, in chapter 5, and then the bulk of it's in chapter 3. Make sure it aligns. As our research as our research program progresses, changes happen. If a change happens in chapter 3, make sure that's reflected in how you've written about it in the other chapters. Because sometimes we forget, and we've really got to do a detailed audit of what we write, just to make sure that everything is up to date so that the whole document tells the same story. Some issues to consider. Okay, avoid including irrelevant details. Now, you have got to decide what is relevant and what is irrelevant. That one's a challenge. I can't give you advice there. We don't want to tell so much of a story that, as the old phrase goes, we're telling grandma to suck eggs, because we're not sure what that's going to be. But we have to make sure that the information presented is enough for an independent researcher to come along, to follow, and to come out with the same results. It's like cooking, like baking a cake. We have a recipe, everybody follows the recipe, most people get pretty much the same outcome. That's the same for our methodology chapter. Okay, keep it straightforward, but thorough. And what I mean by that is, look, be direct, be to the point, be detailed. But if the detail does not add to your reader's understanding, leave it out. Now, I recently helped a doctoral candidate with some research. And there's an interesting part. She was doing research on blind teachers, teachers who had visual impairments. And there were 3 different categories of blindness. And what she did is every time she mentioned a respondent, not only did she say respondent 2, she listed the blindness category with that. And at first I thought, oh, that's a lot of extra words you didn't need. Until I realized that as I'd read the whole thing, that extra little bit of information helped remind me every single time this person's condition. So it gave me context. It contributed to my understanding. So I kept it. I asked, at first I'm like, you need to get rid of this. And then after reflecting on it, I realized, no, you have to keep it. It's what helps the reader fully understand the context in which you're working in. Now, irrelevant information includes unnecessary explanation of basic procedures. Okay. Only explain them if they're unconventional or unfamiliar to your audience. I don't want a detailed explanation of, I sent an email on the 4th of April at 2:15 p.m. to the gatekeeper at organization X to speak to person Y. At 4:45, I received a reply. That's too much detail. Gatekeeper was approached via email. Response was received. Appointment was made. That's straightforward, detailed enough. That's all I need. Okay. Avoid insufficient justification. Most of us, if we look at the typical qualitative methods, interviews, focus groups, observation, even to some extent, different approaches for creative research methods. Most of us will look at that and go, okay, that's fine. We don't have to overkill why we're doing it. One or two citations that work, perfectly fine. Do not ignore analyzing or discussing problems. And this really comes back to this part, the hurdles or difficulties, okay? If you had a problem, don't try to, oh no, I was a good researcher, it didn't happen. The more honest you are about the challenges you face, the more respect I have for you as a researcher. Because two things. One, I see you solving a problem. That's fantastic. And two, nobody's research happens smoothly. That's unrealistic. So if you don't discuss problems in your Viva, I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to say, well, I'm pretty sure you must have had problems. Why didn't you tell me about it? I'm not going to ask you to tell me what the problems were. I'm going to say, why didn't you tell me about it? And that's going to put you in a worse position. So, do discuss them. And lack of detail, more is more. Writing our first drafts, write too much, edit out later. You can make those decisions when the whole piece is together and you can decide, yeah, okay, this is the way that it should be. And before I go into sort of wrapping up, I want you to also consider identity. Who are you as a researcher? Now, this is often positionality or reflexivity. You can go watch one of my videos on that, or you can check out some of the resources that are available online. Why I like this in the methodology chapter is we each have a history, and that history makes us connected to our research topic in some way. It showcases perhaps our biases. It showcases the influences we have. It gives us a chance to be honest about the worldview that we take in doing this research. I personally believe, and this is something, yes, you should be talking to your supervisor about it, of course, but this to me is something that really should be included in chapter 3. Because I want you to address why you are the right person to do the research. Now, my last slide before I go into a Q&A, a few key takeaways. In your research methods chapter, you're justifying, you're defending both method and decisions that you have made. This is not just writing about the method. This is the choices that you make. Keep that in mind. If your chapter is pure method and nothing about where you had two pathways and you chose one, your chapter's incomplete to me. Make your description, make your discussion replicable by other researchers. And that simply means, look, another researcher can come along, see how you've done it, go and apply that to the population and come back with similar outcomes. And the third one is remember the you in your research. And that's really consider your identity. Okay, remember the you in your research. Who are you? Why is it you? What do you bring to the table? These are the key things that sharpen a research methods chapter. And my advice, write first, edit later. I should have said write first, edit last. Evolve the chapter from the proposal to the dissertation because it does change over time.